Well, hello everybody. My name is Sarah. I'm the Real Simple Mama. And today's video is not about chickens, haha. It's actually going to be about plants, yay! So I will say that while I am not a botanist, I'm not a horticulturist, plants are one of my passions. And now that our finances have freed up a little bit as well, we have bought our home, we are no longer renting, we're able to do a lot more with plants. So I wanted to do a beginner's guide to outdoor plants. I'm going to talk really briefly about trees, and I'm going to talk really briefly about indoor plants, but otherwise we're just going to talk about some different terms and some guidelines if you're thinking about adding something to your landscape, whether you're wanting to put it in the pot or in the ground. So really briefly, some plants can be indoor or outdoor, but plants that are strictly indoor, which is usually like succulents, aloe plants, the small variants, the medicinal aloe plants, and spider plants, goldfish plants, those types of things. If they are an indoor plant, usually they will need a lot less water, like once every week or even less than that, because they grow really slowly. And that's true of orchids, like I said, succulents, and a lot of other house plants or indoor plants. But once we're talking about outdoor plants, they are going to be growing a lot more quickly. Usually they're going to, a lot of them, of course, produce food. And we're going to talk about a couple of terms that help you kind of distinguish, okay, what does this mean? What I want this for this space. And this is not all I'm showing you, so don't worry. Now, I want to talk about trees for just a second. Trees, obviously, there are different kinds. And the three that I'm going to talk about real briefly, these are fruit trees. This is a fig stick, a fig tree. This is a Satsuma orange tree. These fruit trees I was debating on putting in the ground. And the reason I wanted to point them out to you is I actually read that a lot of fruit trees will produce more fruit if you leave them in a pot, if you don't put them in the ground. They do a little bit better if they're actually root bound. So these guys are going to stay in pots for a while. The other thing is, just a quick note on citrus trees, that a lot of them should just be left in pots anyway. That would be, lemons, limes, oranges, mandarins, grapefruits, that type of thing. So those are those babies. They've just been planted. They're going to stay like that. Now, when we're talking about outdoor plants and you're thinking about what you want, like with everything else, I mean, if you're like me, you go to the nursery, and that's where, like, I need to be careful that I don't spend a ton of money. Like, I don't need shoes and clothes and makeup and jewelry and diamonds and all of that kind of stuff. Like, I want plants and chickens, of course. So I need to think about, where am I going to put this? Where do I want to put this? So a couple of things that I would recommend you do for homework, and then we'll get into the terminology. Some of the things that I think you should do for homework is, first of all, you need to figure out what zone you're in, so that you have an idea of, for me, for example, like, I wouldn't really want a cherry tree. I mean, I would love one, but I know it's probably not going to thrive in zone 8, because we have usually very mild winters, a couple of very minor freezes. Like, we barely get, in Fahrenheit, barely below freezing, just a couple times a year. And our summers are crazy intense. Okay, so first of all, find out what zone you're in. Second of all, figure out which direction your house faces. Okay, for example, my house faces south. So south is that way. This is the north side. Okay, so I know, yeah, there's going to be full sun back here, but it's not the west sun, right, which is the hot afternoon sun. So I need to keep all of that in mind. If I'm buying either a flowering plant or a fruit plant or a vegetable plant, something that produces food, or a lot of herbs, they want full sun for at least 4 to 6 hours a day. So I need to keep that in mind. I don't want to put them on the east side of the house. I don't want to put them underneath a big tree where they're going to get a lot of shade. Okay, so step one, find what zone you live in so you can start learning about appropriate plants. And the next step is figure out which direction your house faces, and that way you can kind of keep an idea, just keep in mind, okay, this is, the east side of the house, and so I need to think about, where the sun is going to be and things like that. On the flip side, figuring out what side your house faces. For us, for example, we have to watch where the north wind is. So I need to watch out for little baby plants when it gets in the winter. I don't want them right here where they're getting slammed by the north wind. Okay? So let's start talking about some terminology. When you're looking at plants that you're wanting for outdoor, the first thing I would say is you need to think about if you want an annual or if you want a perennial. And that's a term for most plants, and it has to do with how long the plant is going to live. And unfortunately, this doesn't matter if you have it indoor or outdoor, or you fertilize them or you don't. It has to do just with the plant's lifespan. For example, my kids just planted some zinnias, which is a cute little flower, and they've sprouted in less than 48 hours. They're going to grow really quickly, but they're annuals, so they're going to die. Any plant that is labeled as an annual is only going to live for one season. Some annuals, like tomatoes, they'll live maybe a season and a half, but that is not a plant that, you know, is going to be long term. So if you're going to put an annual in the ground, you know that it's only going to live for one season or maybe 2 seasons, you know, for a total of a year. But then they're going to die and you're going to need to do something else. So if you have flower beds around a tree or something and you plant, one of my favorite annuals, it always reminds me of my mom, is pansies. And pansies are great here in Texas because they like the cold weather, when most of our other plants are like, no, it's cold, and they're freezing and they're sort of going into conservation mode, right? Pansies are a great little annual to plant, and they're beautiful and they're all different colors, but guess what? As soon as it starts to get warm, that pansy's life cycle is done and the pansies will pass away. And then you've got, you know, basically a flower bed where you've got to plant something else. So annual versus perennial. Now, a plant that is a perennial, which is almost, well, it's everything that you see here. These are Esperanza, which is like a flowering pollinator shrub. This is a mandevilla, which is a flowering vine. That is a foxtail fern. This is a blue plumbago, and that's a desert rose there in the corner. Those are all perennials, and the rule for perennials is before they're going to get to like that full grown glorious size and hardiness that you see advertised like on the labels and stuff, it's going to take at least 2 seasons, maybe 3. And the rule is first year sleep. They're not going to do a lot of growing above ground. They're doing all the work under the ground. Okay, so first year is sleep. Second year is creep. They'll start to grow, but slowly. Third year is leap. If you've taken care of them and done your homework for the first couple seasons, after, for example, I just bought these Esperanza. I'm going to put them in the ground. They're not going to grow much this year. They're doing their work below ground first. Okay, they're getting a really good root system established. They're going deep so that they can find water and they won't be weakened with our summer. Next year, they'll start to actually grow above ground, but then by the time they've been in the ground for 2 or 3 years, then they'll explode and they're going to be a lot more durable and stable with the weather changes that we have, okay? So keep that in mind. Perennials, I buy almost only perennials because I pay for them once. I do the work once as far as like digging and putting them in the ground, right? Then after that, now again, being in zone 8, I'm going to have to baby them this summer because they're just new little babies and their roots are still getting established. So I'm going to have to make sure that they get watered every day and I don't let them dry out. I will do deep waterings to make their roots go deep. But then that's it. They're not going to die every season. Okay. A lot of like strawberry plants, like I said, tomato plants, some fruits and vegetables like that are smaller plants, you know, zucchini vines, pumpkin vines, watermelon, a lot of those, they're only going to live for a season and then they're gone. But most herbs, obviously all trees, and then anything that's a perennial, they will continue to produce or grow year after year. They'll just slow down in the winter. Okay, so you've got your zone, you know which direction your house faces and the different sides of your house or your property. And now you're thinking about, do I want an annual or a perennial? Like I said, almost everything that I buy is a perennial because I would rather have it grow slowly, but I only have to buy it once and I only have to plant once, and then that plant will continue to be here for years. At the end of this video, I'll give you a tour of the butterfly garden I just finished, and you can see some different plants and a couple of other tips, plus a cute little surprise at the end that we just found. So that's what you're looking at. The next thing you need to consider, you know, let's say you've got a garden or a zone where you want to add some landscaping. You need to really look at the plants and what they're going to look like when they're full grown. Because I think a lot of people, myself included, I've gone and bought things because they're pretty and because I like them, and I haven't really learned, well, this one's actually going to spread, or this one is a ground cover, which means it will continue to go as long as you let it. Or some people buy something that is like an invasive species or it's not native, and then it like takes over your garden. So I'll give you a couple of examples, and this is particularly useful if you're in the same area as I am. You're in zone like 6, 7, 8. So there is a lot of ground cover, and we'll talk about arranging your landscape in a minute. There's a lot of ground cover. Let me walk over and show you one. And ground cover basically means it's going to spread horizontally, but it doesn't get really tall. So it's good if maybe you have like a flower bed on the side of your house, or you've got a deep flower bed. So you could do tall stuff in the back and shorter stuff in the front, right? And that way you've got like depth and layers. This is a really nice one. This is called Purple Heart. And you can see the stem is only, I don't know, 6-8 inches tall, but it doesn't grow tall. Its strategy is I'm going to have my roots spread out as wide as possible so that I can get all of those nutrients. Okay, so this is Purple Heart. It's also a perennial. It will continue to grow and spread and grow and spread. So I'm thinking about putting it like in the edges of the chicken run. A bonus if you've got like chickens or something like that, which can be good and it can be bad. I'm going to plant things sort of on either side of the fence so that the chickens can eat some of it, but they can't kill the entire root system. Basically, they'll be giving it a trim whenever they eat it, but they can't kill the whole plant. But if you've got animals or little kids and you're worried about anybody eating anything, putting stuff in their mouth, you do also need to be considerate of, is this plant poisonous? Okay, some plants are only poisonous if you ingest the seed. Some plants, like unfortunately this tree here, it's an ornamental tree called a Texas mountain laurel. And it's an evergreen and it's a great tree, but every part of it is poisonous. So you just need to keep that in mind if you've got little kids or dogs, or maybe your husband likes to chew on stuff in the yard. I don't know. So just keep that in mind. So I've had to make sure that all of the plants that I have are not toxic to chickens, like the tomato plants are. My chickens love tomatoes, but they can't eat the plant because the tomato is in the nightshade family, which is poisonous. Other plants, you know, you need to watch because they will really, really expand. There's some of my herbs right there. There's peppermint, which will also take over. It doesn't ever grow very tall. That's why it's in this like basket so it can cascade over. But peppermint will take over. A lot of herbs will take over. Rosemary, oregano. So keep that in mind. There are other plants like that cute little Esperanza, those two small green pots that are currently on your right. Those bushes can get, I mean, that's a full grown one right there. They can get 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide. And that's not really fair to the plant if you buy one and either you put it in an area that's not appropriate for it, like here, I'm going to keep you in this tiny little pot for your whole life, even though you're supposed to be in a big space, or that you buy a plant and you decide it wasn't right for that space, so then you rip it up and you kill it. So that's also a waste of your money, if we're being honest here. So we're thinking about if it's an annual or a perennial, and you're thinking about how it's going to grow. Now, the good news is that most plants, if you buy them in a nursery or a hardware store or a typical plant place, they will have tags on them. Or if you're getting any kind of seed packet, it should say on the back of the seed packet. So here, there's the different zones. And then it has all of the information right there, as far as, you know, how deep you sow the seeds, how far apart they need to be, and it tells you how tall they grow. This is morning glories. They are poisonous, so I can't plant them anywhere by my chickens. But this is a really beautiful flowering vine, and it'll grow like crazy, but it's an annual. So I know they're all going to die at the first freeze. They'll be gone. Okay, now I'll tell you, I've never done any of the taking care of the seeds and soaking them and all of that other stuff. I've never done that, and mine have grown like crazy. So just keep that in mind. So far that's what we've talked about, right? Annuals or perennials. Thinking about if they need full sun or not, and then what are they going to look like when they're full grown. So now for the second half of the video, I'm going to give you more just kind of warnings and advice when you're ready to start putting stuff in the ground. So let's assume that you've already gone to your nurseries, you've been asking your local experts, you've been driving around in neighborhoods and maybe using an app like Google Lens and taking pictures of stuff, or maybe you take leaves, like I don't know what kind of tree this is, so you pop a leaf off and you can take it to your local nursery or maybe even your hardware store, anywhere where they've got, you know, a nursery in the store, and just kind of ask like, what is this? And then you can figure out what you've got and what you want to plant and where. Like my hibiscus tree is sort of coming back to life. This tree has always been very weak, and it's kind of alive now, sort of. So we're going to talk now about like, okay, now I've pretty much figured out what I want to plant, and this is just a couple of tips to help you when you're getting ready to put them in the ground or in pots. So the one thing that I wanted to make sure that I reminded you of is checking out things that are going to be growing well in your area and things that are invasive. So you just need to be careful, because some things that are ground cover, for example, or other plants, if you plant it and think, oh, that'll be a nice little plant to stay in that corner, and in 2 years it's spread like 10 feet. So you've got your stuff, you know what you want to plant. I would say if you are in an area that is a zone like mine, again, I am zone 8, the rule for us in the areas that have really hot summers is you want to have your stuff all in the ground before Mother's Day, which is May. And the earlier you can get it, the better. A lot of the recommendations is pretty much as soon as you've had your last freeze of the season, get stuff in the ground, because the longer they get to kind of do their homework and get their roots going, the stronger they will be when it comes to the crazy hot summers. Now, if you are in an area who has a mild summer and a bad winter, it's going to be different for you. So just kind of look up like what time of year is best, because you know the nurseries will take your money all year long, even if it's not the greatest time. You know, they'll still have plant sales and stuff in the heat of June and July, and it's like, number one, I don't want to be out there planting stuff, and number two, my plants are not going to be doing very well. Okay, so keep that in mind. When you are taking a plant from a pot that it came in the nursery and you're wanting to put it either in a bigger pot or in the ground, here's a couple of tips, and I'll talk briefly about pots first. If you're going from that pot to a bigger one, you want to think about using potting soil, and you can look at different brands. It doesn't really matter. I've bought the cheapest stuff before. I've bought the Miracle Grow. I do like the name brand when it comes to this, but it doesn't really matter. And then you want to, if I was to take this plant out of a pot, you want to break up the roots that are at the bottom, especially if it's root bound. And then you want to make sure that all of the roots are covered with dirt by the time you put it in. Okay. If you are digging a hole in the ground, like I'm doing for that magnolia tree, these two Esperanza are actually going to go into the chicken run, and I've got my little plant guards while they get just acclimated to their new home. You want to make the hole that you're digging in the ground at least as deep as the pot, right? As deep as the pot is fine. And then if you can, make it twice as wide as the current pot that they're in. That way it's basically just forcing you to loosen up more ground. And a lot of the times the problem is if your plant has been spoiled and it's in potting soil and you're going to put it in the dirt, you need to be fertilizing it and using compost if you've got it, first of all. But second of all, you need to give those roots time, because they're going to want to stay there in the good, easy soil that's got all the nutrients in it. So you need to be taking care of them to make sure that they're spreading their roots out. You don't want a lot of, if you're looking at me from this perspective, I don't want that tree to have a lot of shallow roots. I want to water it deeply, and I want to make sure that their roots go down deep, because that will help with the extreme temperatures. You don't want shallow roots, okay? That's not good for anything, for a bush or a tree or anything. The other thing to keep in mind is you want to find a good local living mulch, which basically means that they used local trees and mulched them up. You know, they use that tree shredder basically. Living mulch is the best. Local is the best. Watch out for stuff that has a whole bunch of dyes and stuff like that on it, because in my opinion, first of all, it's going to look like crap after a season or two. And second of all, a lot of that at times that's like a nasty, it's just chemicals and stuff that you don't need. But mulch is great for everything. You can use the same kind of mulch from your fruit trees to your gardens to flowers to bushes to trees to everything. But you want to use mulch. Mulch is awesome because basically it's going to save you on your energy bills for watering stuff, and it's going to help keep a more consistent temperature for your plants. So that means that in the winter, the mulch is going to act as a blanket that holds the heat in. In the summer, it's going to keep the soil cooler, and it's going to keep the water in there longer, so you don't have to water as often. So compost is always a great idea for everything. And you can put compost down in the hole first, then put your plant in the hole or in the pot, and then mulch over it. You can use mulch in pots or in the ground. Just if I was to be replanting this Esperanza, if I had just replanted it, I'm going to leave a little bit of space, almost like a neckline here, before I put the mulch up. So I would give this a good inch or two before, so I wouldn't start the mulch until right there. Okay, to give it a little bit of area. And then you're going to water it immediately as soon as, yes, this video is not about you. As soon as you get your plant in the ground, put mulch over it and water it really well. You want to replace that mulch every year or two if you can. And you can just scrape it up. And I wouldn't compost it because it'll take way too long. You can put it in your compost pile, or you can just bag it up and have it taken out with your organic trash. Right, chicks? Right, girls? So as far as planting things, again, watch out for invasive species. Think about how big something is going to end up and layering as it's applicable. You also want to think about having a compost ready to go and having mulch. Fertilizer is great, but you don't want to spoil your plants if you're putting them in the ground. They need to get used to that ground and that dirt. So You know, for that tree, he's been in potting soil. So I'm going to put some fertilizer down in the bottom of the hole. And whenever I water that tree, I'm going to water it deeply. So in other words, I'm only going to water him about twice a week. But I'm going to water for a long time so that the water goes deep and soaks into the ground, because I want to teach him your roots need to go deep. Okay, long term, that'll make that plant a lot stronger than if all of their roots are right here on the surface. Okay, if that makes sense. Everything needs to be in the ground by Mother's Day. But be talking to experts, go look around, you know, go knock on neighbors' doors, or look around and kind of get an idea for the color schemes that you like, for the things that you like. Like I said, I'm a big fan of perennials because theoretically I buy once and I have to water them and spoil them a little bit for their first 2 years, but digging once and buying once, and those plants will live for years. So that's what I like. And I also like looking for plants that are going to be, like I said, I'm looking for Texas hardy plants, or in Texas they're called superstars. And we have Texas A&M University, which does really extensive studies of telling us, hey, these are the plants that are going to be doing the best with the type of soil that we have, because San Antonio has a lot of clay, and we have a lot of limestone. That's a problem for, you know, you digging deep garden beds and all kinds of stuff like that. So keep that in mind. If you've got a new baby plant, or like I said, a citrus tree or things like that, if it's something that's going to be sensitive to a really, really, really hot winter, a really, really, really hot summer, or a really, really, really cold winter, you might want to consider leaving it in a pot indefinitely. And that way, like my little fruit tree babies over there, when it gets freezing, it'll be easy for me to cover them, or I can drag them onto my porch right next to my house, or I can drag them into my garage and save them while they're still young and they're little babies. Okay. So again, in no means am I an expert, but I like to spend my disposable income on plants, as you can see. But if you've got suggestions for people, just general, like, hey, I'm wanting to start doing landscaping, I suddenly care about my yard or my house, or I want to learn more, put suggestions down here. But again, the most important things are know what zone you're in, so that you can start looking up stuff that's good for your area, and know which direction your house faces. Cool. But we love plants. We'll do some more videos about plants soon. Again, just from, like, you know, a person who's kind of just a nerd and passionate about it. That's what I read about late at night. His plant stuff. I'll be doing a video soon about all of my indoor plants to show you, like, just a beginner's guide to house plants and stuff that lives indoors. Remember, those plants are the ones that don't need nearly as much attention. You can water them once every 1 or 2 weeks and you're good. And they don't need as much sunlight. They're great for cleaning your air. But that's a whole different story. So we'll talk about that on my next plant video. Ta-da! Our butterfly garden is pretty much done. So I'm going to do a super quick tour of the plants that we did. Again, we live in the San Antonio, Texas area. So this is zone 8. We go to garden classes, and we do, we follow the Texas A&M Agricultural Center and all of their recommendations for Texas hardy plants. So what we did is we picked our favorite. These are all perennials, which again means that they will, most of them will probably die down pretty close to the ground every winter, but as long as you take care of them during the year, they will come back year after year. So for me, it was basically do the work once, you know, pay for them once, put them in the ground once, and then we'll have them for years to come, and they will get bigger every year. So we picked our favorites and put 2 of those in, spread around, and then some of the other ones, that the plants that I wasn't quite as familiar with, I've only got 1 right now. So starting from right here, I put like the shorter, more like ground cover trailing plants, crawling plants in the front. This is a blue verbena, which is not blooming very much yet, but it's a blue purple, really light and ferny. This is a trailing or a crawling lantana, which is purple and white blooms. You can see this is my other blue verbena. So if you want to see what it looks like, this one is stringier because it did not like being in the greenhouse this winter, but that's what it looks like. So that the ones in the front are not going to have super thick foliage so that we can see through them. This is a Mexican bush sage, which my son says smells like green beans. These are also really hardy, and they will get tall, and a lot of these will get much taller, of course, and they will spread. This is our first butterfly weed, which is one of the best pollinator plants. This is one, pollinator plants, and I've done another video about them, but pollinator plants, there's 2 different kinds. There's a kind that things like bees and butterflies and hummingbirds need for the nectar, and then there's another kind of pollinator plant that butterflies need to lay their eggs. This is one of the ones that butterflies will use to lay their eggs. So when you see a monarch hanging around on it, she's actually looking for a good place to lay her eggs, which is where you'll have the baby caterpillars, and then the caterpillars eat it. This is one of my favorite plants. This is a regular, just Texas yellow Esperanza. and Esperanza means hope. This is another variation which has really gorgeous multicolored blooms. Those are Esperanza. This gorgeous purple we just bought yesterday, it filled in that spot perfectly. It's called a bougainvillea, and the leaves are very papery, and then it has like a discolored leaf outer flower, and then the actual flower is the white on the inside. This is our other butterfly plant, and we have something neat to show you at the end. This is a Dallas red lantana, which will have colors like that, multiple colors. Here's the other bougainvillea. Then I've got, this is a mist flower, which is another great butterfly plant. That's a red acanthus. It's not blooming yet. He also did not like being in the greenhouse this winter because the air circulation wasn't great. This is a blue plumbago, which is a lavender colored flower. Looks like that, and it's little clusters of flowers. This one will grow fairly tall, which is why he's in the back. There's my pride of Barbados, or the Mexican bird of paradise. Again, it's a perennial, so it looks kind of sad at the end of the winter, but it will fill out. And then this is going to be the most amazing thing. This is called a fringe flower, and there are different variations. Some of them are dwarf. Some of them you can prune up to be more like an ornamental tree, which is what this one is going to end up being in a few years. This one will get to be about 6 feet tall if I want to keep pruning it up. This variation is called the Cherry Blast Chinese fringe flower, and it will have those dark purplish looking leaves for most of the year, and it blooms pink. So then eventually, you know, we'll have this tree going here in this space. And as we were putting the rest of the plants in the ground in perfect timing right before it rained, we have something really exciting that we wanted to show you that we noticed as we were planting this butterfly weed. Okay guys, can you find one? They're way up by the flowers.
Yeah. Sean,
See one? There are, where is it? I don't see it yet. Oh, yep. Okay, I see it. If you look in the middle here, see if you can see it. Oh, there he is. There are tiny baby monarch caterpillars on our butterfly weed. And we've only had it out here for like a week, and we see monarchs here every day because there's our dinner table right there, so we can look out every morning.
And there's aphids.
Yeah, there's aphids that we're getting rid of, and we have ladybugs we're about ready to release. But look, there's a baby caterpillar. And then we saw, I'm trying to remember where. Oh, yeah, look. That's the tiniest, right there, in the center of the shot. That's the tiniest little baby monarch caterpillar I've ever seen.
Well.
Right in the middle there, babe. So they will eat on that plant until they're ready to start turning into a monarch. This is like a bee bath because it's super shallow, so that bees and really tiny little pollinators and stuff can get their drink without worrying about drowning. So it's super shallow. They could stand on those pretty rocks that we bought. But this was a really super affordable way for us to do something I've always wanted to do on our butterfly garden. So those things will continue to spread year after year. They'll get a little bit bigger. Eventually we'll have that fringe tree growing up 6 feet tall. And then we've got plans to put some kind of bulb right there, probably lilies. And then we've got another flat wall around there where we're probably going to do roses. But I just wanted to show you our little butterfly garden. Those rocks that we got were from the dollar store. This solar light bird bath is from Amazon. So, I mean, everything is really, really affordable, and it's going to be so enjoyable and so great for the earth for years to come.